We'd like to start off by asking, how can we increase our life expectancy and improve our well-being?
All of it comes from evaluation of the ideas that one holds. In other words, when you look at your inner landscape, is it filled with potential advisors, potential helpers, or are you struggling against the units that one finds oneself in? In units, I'm referring to the fields of influence. So everyone is involved in the social environment, in the political environment, and so on. Are you at odds with it? Or do you have an inherent faith in the wellness of your potentials? In other words, do you think that the foods that you are eating are contaminated? Because if they are contaminated in your mind, then they become a contamination for the body's responses to it. The body then rejects what it feels is not appropriate for it, because that is the nature of one's ideas about the body. So often one is in internal conflict. One has bought into the idea that the genetics determine how one is. And then one dislikes what the genetics one has already agreed to are producing in the physical realm. Now, what occurs when you have an internal conflict is you begin to find external reasons for that conflict. One then is no longer internally conflicted, but the victim of an external authority. Does this make some sort of sense? So how will you thrive in an environment that is fundamentally against oneself? One then is looking for additional things to add to try to survive the potential that are working all around you to end your life. What is going to happen? Then you become obsessed. The obsession with life that is physicalized. One has become adapted into the physical environment and is fighting what is one's destiny at the higher levels of experience. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes. Can I summarize by saying what I'm hearing here is that we start with an internal conflict, then we find the external reasons to validate that internal conflict. Then we can become a victim of that external authoritative reasons, which then creates sort of a cycle of conflict where we become really obsessed with the physical life. What would then be the opposite if we were in flow and had faith and is in a positive?
Then one would live with a joyful attitude. One would accept what is coming from the world around one and look into how that is beneficial. One would then alternately say, this is beneficial. I am simply not seeing the benefits of it, even if those benefits are not in the continuation of the material existence. Because if one is, shall we say, attuned to the spiritual world, that is the higher frequencies, life on the physical plane is life filled with experience for the period of time that one is involved in it. And if one, shall we say, is attracting to one serious consequences, unless one is willing to consider the ideas one holds, who is responsible for the creation, because in your wider field of influence, that regard, that responsibility has been projected out onto a God one has created. And everywhere in the world, you see the influences, impacts of, shall we say, conflicting gods. Gods fighting each other for domination. You understand what sort of God is bringing that into being, unless it is a God of physicality. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there is a shift in consciousness occurring at the present time. Everywhere around you can see it being perpetrated by victims and perpetrators. You can see the conflicting world that everyone is sharing. The true nature of integration for the benefit of the whole has been lost in the internal and external conflicts. That is why all of the events occur. So you are talking also, shall we say, about diet. What is possible if everything is poisoned? Do you understand what I mean? One is trying to have, shall we say, a natural diet into the body within a conflicted society. And so then it becomes more and more difficult. And yet, beyond that, if one recognizes that the diet is about the interconnection, interrelationship between the physical body and what is consumed by it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you are a consumer of, shall we say, devices or whatever that are, shall we say, less than necessary, then one will consume within the food is those things which are fundamentally unnecessary. Do you follow what I mean? Because the notion, the attitudes are within those parts of the creation.
Thank you. So just going back a little way, when we talked about living a life with joyful attitude and then accepting what is coming from the world or coming my way, looking at what is beneficial, and if we're not understanding maybe if a physical ailment or illness is not beneficial, just knowing that there's simply something there that is beneficial but we're not seeing it, but basically taking overall responsibility for our creation. If we do all that rather than the first cycle we talked about, will that extend our life expectancy?
Life expectancy is dependent on the creation of time. Do you understand? So let us say there is someone who lives for 110 or so years, but it has not been a moment of joy. One has been hypercritical, one has no friends, and so on and so forth. And someone who lives in total joy only for 30 years, which one has well-being? Do you understand? Which one has had a life that is endless? Which one will carry their attitudes and ideas and experiences into the into the next framework of experience? Which one would you choose? Do you follow what I mean? So time is not of concern. Experience and joy is of concern. How one experiences the life is what is important criterion. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, and it's interesting. I watched a documentary recently, well, a few years ago, around, is it an island off, is it Italy or Greece, where the life expectancy or the length of time that people were staying on this physical plane in that place was much longer than everywhere else in the world. And what really struck me is how much fun they had. They laughed, they had so much joy.
Of course, because they are not at war. They are a community that is integrated. And when someone passes on, there is no great desire to hold them, but it is a time to have a great celebration of the life. How often do you go to your funerals in bright colors with singing songs of joy and so forth, that someone has finally reached the moment of release? Do you understand what I'm saying? Not at all. You are wanting to hold on and to sob and cry and so on. And who is the ones that are suffering? Those that are left behind because they do not hold within them joy. Do you understand? Then if joy is, shall we say, to be bred, not false joys brought about by addictive materials, but ones that are freedom. They bring freeing qualities. One is free to experience life and in ways that do not impact on others, that do not are not life destroying for others. Excuse the body.
Sorry, carry on.
So it is always the quality of upliftment. Do you know what it's like when someone is suffering and then you hold them in the field of joy? They will be uplifted. You are not taking away their own degree of suffering, but you are opening the door to opportunities to see the causes, the true causal nature of the ideas that are causing the suffering. You understand, shall we say, even in the moments of suffering, if you put your attention on something that is uplifting for yourself, you find that you are lifted out of the very suffering one is involved in. The difficulty, of course, is responsibility. The difficulty is, shall we say, owning up. In many or even most cases, shall we say, the criminal does not acknowledge the crime. And you are filled with judgments about such attitudes and actions and so on, while you are doing exactly the same to yourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there is a moment to acknowledge one's flaws, and to, in the acknowledgement, uncover the ideas that brought that into the field of influence of existence. And when you bring in those notions, those ideas, and you begin to see the causal link with the flaw, then immediately you have the opportunity to change that thought, to change that criticism, judgment of others, judgment of self. And in doing so, freedom is imminent. And with that freedom comes the uplifting of the nature of soul, and joy arrives.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a question here from one of our listeners. Can you provide your perspective on the ultimate diet for humans, and whether all humans can actually eat the same diet, or whether we are best suited to a diet that suits our geographic or ancestry background? For example, if you are of Polynesian ancestry, then food that is grown on the islands or found on the islands, is this more ideal, or does it matter?
You live in a global experience. What used to be isolation, what used to be, shall we say, village communities, lived within the village community aspect. One has to take into account many observations. In other words, while the mass creation is delivered by, shall we call it, genetic structures. Each grouping then has to decide what is of benefit for their conditions in the, shall we say, the local environment. In other words, shall we say, the ultimate diet is food and exercise. Having the perfect diet with no exercise will not be beneficial. Having more exercise and a poor diet will not be beneficial. One has to, shall we say, integrate the two things. One has to consider what is appropriate for the palate. And first of all, I want to say, cast out all the ideas that other people are putting upon you. Because what is of benefit for some types of system, that is, shall we say, there is processing. Some people are slow processors, some people are fast processors. So the dietary requirements are quite different. And the results will be obvious. You understand, sometimes those with fast processing will require more food more often. That is, they are processing it and converting it into activity, whether that is physical, emotional, or mental activity. All of it is burning up the energy that is released. And some, shall we say, slower processes should, shall we say, take less food and even at less during a particular day. Also, it is a common activity for humans to, shall we say, to eat their food late in the evening rather than allowing it time to process before they are taken to the bed, where the energy can be assimilated. But I want to take us away from the physical world, because the processing is always related to the attitudes, ideas, beliefs, and so forth. So it is essential that one is learning not just to process food, but to process one's emotional responses to the activities of the day, and to review the ideas and attitudes and beliefs that one is assimilating from one's responses. Shall we say, the response is momentary. It therefore occurs in the immediate period of time. And the the taking in whatever one has decided that is adopted as attitudes and ideas is stored away. Such stored ideas can then reproduce the responses at any period of time. So you are then reacting to events with ideas that were taken from a previous period of time. So it is important in a dietary consideration to look at your emotional and mental diet, as well as the physical. Does this begin to take, to answer some of the question?
Yeah, it does, very much so. So
I want to say this, because in this area of discussion, one is always treading on toes, because when you listen, you become responsive. Does it uplift, or do you feel attacked? Because if you are becoming attacked, I want to say, review what is it that is attacking you. That is such an important topic, because in the world of victim, there is always a perpetrator. The perpetrators, of course, are wandering across the planet looking for victims, whether that is physical, emotional, mental, and so on and so forth. They are, shall we say, astute at seeing a victim in waiting. Is there another question, or is that enough for today?
that's enough for today, I think, unless you've got something else you'd like to add.
I want to simply close by saying, think on this. Once again, thank you for your time. I want to also say, there is a love of many that fills, shall we say, the greatest cosmic field of influence that is holding everything and everyone in its, shall we say, its uplifting field. It brings about the ultimate changes that are necessary in the evolution of consciousness. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mercredan, and thank you, Francis. Another amazing chat today. And thank you to everybody that has tuned in to listen or watching on the replay. Thank you so much for your open mind and your curiosity to contemplate what is being offered today. If you enjoyed today's session, please like our video. It really does help us with the YouTube algorithms. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week if you'd like to join us. Thank you so much and have a good day.